Hare Krishna. And so we continue with our seminar on transcendental psychology. So there was something I didn't mention in the last class that we had, which I have to speak about now to begin, and that is about the 4 levels of consciousness So this is a verse from 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Sattvad jugaranam vidyat rajasa swapnam adiset prasvapam tamasa jantosh turyam trishu santatam. Yes. So the wakeful state, Jagrata, this is born of the mode of goodness. The dream state, Svapna, is born of the mode of passion. And then the dreamless state, Susupti, is born of the mode of ignorance. And then there's a 4th state called Turiya, which is transcendental. We know this as Shuddha Sattva or Vasudev Sattva. Pure goodness without any tinge of material nature. So this verse describes that this fourth state is actually the basis of the other three. That the living entity actually belongs to pure consciousness. But like Srila Prabhupada used to explain, that original pure consciousness is filtered through this coloring of wakefulness, sleep, deep sleep. So now this is important. You'll see why as we develop today's seminar. So today we're going to be talking about how consciousness is conditioned by these modes of nature. And we're going to start with some quotations from different Vedic scriptures. So the first is from Taittiriya Upanishad, chapter 2, verse 7. Raso vaisaha rasam hiyavayam labdam nandi bhavati ko hi evanyat ka pranyat yad esha akash anando nasyat esha hi eshanandayati. And this means that the supreme truth is rasa. And the jiva becomes blissful upon attaining this rasa. Who would work with the body and the sensory powers if this blissful taste did not exist? He gives bliss to all. So, what we are learning here is that all living entities, and this is what Srila Prabhupada explains in his introduction of Nectar Devotion, that all living entities, whether we're speaking of Krishna conscious or not Krishna conscious, but all of them are working due to rasa, due to some taste.
Tady se dozvídáme to tež, co Prabhupada uvádí v úvodu k Nektaru oddanosti, že všechny živé bytosti, jak jsou si vědomé Krišny nebo ne, tak jednají kvůli rase, kvůli nějaké chuti.
And in this verse we're seeing that all forms of this rasa that people are pursuing after in their work, it all comes from one ultimate source. And that is Krishna. Mm-hmm. So, but obviously there are differences in people's tastes. Mm-hmm. And the two basic differences are, there are those who work with a spiritual, transcendental taste, and those who are interested in material pleasure, material sense gratification. So let us now start to look at this difference. From Srimad Bhagavatam 3:25-15. Chita kalp asya bandhaya muktaye chatmanomatam guneshu saktam bandhaya ratam vapungsi muktaye. The stage in which the consciousness of the living entity is attracted by the three modes of material nature is called conditional life.
Stav, kdy vědomí živé bytosti přitahují tři kvality přírody, se nazývá podmíněný život.
But when that same consciousness is attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is situated in the consciousness of liberation.
To je totéž vědomí připoutané k nejvyšší osobnosti božství, tak je ve vědomí na úrovni osvobození.
So, the three modes of material nature, they are the energy of Krishna.
Kvality hmotné přírody jsou energie Krišny.
But what kind of energy is that?
Co je to za energie?
In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna uses the term bhina, which means separated energy. And then there is Krishna and Krishna's own transcendental nature. Krishna for this uses the word mama, which means my own. So, yes, both ultimately have the same basis. But there is a distinction. If one is attracted to the modes of material nature, then what? Bandaya. Then he becomes bound by illusion. And if one is attracted to Krishna himself, then that is the consciousness of liberation. In the next verse, 3:32:19, we learn that it is Krishna who is controlling this. It is Krishna who is determining what we are attracted to. Nunam daivena vihata ye chatyutya kata shudham hitva shrinvanti asadgata purisham eva vidbhuja. So now he's speaking of those persons who are in the material attraction. He says these persons are condemned by the supreme order of the Lord. Because they are averse to the nectar of the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are compared to stool-eating hogs. They give up hearing the transcendental activities of the Lord and indulge in hearing of the abominable activities of materialistic persons. Yes. So, these persons are condemned. They've been placed in that condemned category by Krishna. And this is due to the nature of their desire. Rig Veda 10:129-4. Kamastad agre sama vartatadi manaso retha pratamam yadashit. In the beginning there was desire, which was the primal germ of the mind. Yes. So again and again we'll find it's stated in Bhagavatam and elsewhere that it is the mind that is the initial stage of the whole creation. Things evolve from subtle to gross. And the germ of the mind, the seed root of the mind itself is desire. So those who take no satisfaction in Krishna, in hearing about Krishna, as we've been understanding from these verses before, then they're attracted to the modes of material nature, and in this way their material desires develop.
nemají zájem, jsou přitahováni nasloucháním o Krišnovi, tak je zájem o hmotu a tím se jí hmotná touha.
And they need a material mind in which these desires can grow up and become thoughts, become plans for sense gratification. And then furthermore, of course, they need a material body in which to act out these plans. So this is how creation comes about. So now, next question, what about devotees within the creation? So Sri Prahlad Maharaj says, Naivo dvije para duratya vaitaranyash tvad virya goyana mahamrita magna chitta suchetato vimukka chitasa indriyarta maya sukhaya bharam udvahato vimudhan. My dear Lord, I am not afraid of material existence. For wherever I stay, I am fully absorbed in thoughts of your glories and activities. So, before going on, let's understand here. We've already heard that the consciousness of liberation is attachment to Krishna. And the consciousness of bondage is attachment to the modes of nature. So Prahlad Maharaj is saying, I am attached to you. So even though he's here in the material world, there's no question of bondage for him. So why would a pure devotee be here then? So chetato vimukka chetasa indriyarta maya sukhaya bharam udvahato vimudha. That my only concern is for the fools and rascals who are making elaborate plans for material happiness. And carrying the heavy burden, maya sukhaya bharam, carrying the heavy burden of maintaining their families, societies, and countries. So here again, in this verse, you see the two. Prahlad Maharaj represents the pure devotee and those who are involved in Maya Sukha, sense gratification. They're absorbed in the material mind, making elaborate plans for sense gratification. That's the nature of their consciousness. So, then finally, Srimad Bhagavatam 10.1.4. Nibritta tarshayar upagiyamanat bhavasaucharach shrotra mano bhiramat ka uttama shloka gunanuvadat puman virajeta vina pasugnat. That the chanting of the holy name of the Lord is relished by the liberated souls. But that doesn't mean that the conditioned souls are left out. For the conditioned souls, the chanting is Bhava Ausarach. It is the medicine to cure this materialistic taste that is infecting their minds. Therefore, the chanting of the holy name is for everyone, both conditioned and liberated. And those who will not take it up, they're called here Pashugnat, which means killer of their own souls. Yes. So with these 6 verses, we are seeing that whether or not we are considered to be liberated or conditioned is a question of taste, the taste towards which our mind flows. And when our mind flows to the material nature, then we become conditioned by material consciousness. And this conditioning is in terms of what we've explained in the beginning of the class. That we're sometimes in a state of deep sleep or unconsciousness. Sometimes we're dreaming, and sometimes we're awake. And so we're going through these three phases. And these each, as we heard, represent the modes of material nature. Furthermore, there's another interesting thing. That the human being is said to be basically situated in the mode of passion. So if the human being is basically situated in the mode of passion, then that means basically our consciousness is svapna, is the dream state. Even when we're awake, dreaming is going on. And what does that mean? You see, when we dream at night, then our mind is interacting mainly with our memory and the desires that are stored in the memory. So that means there are no physical objects in the dream state that we're in contact with. We're in contact with images of our own desires. And so that is what is going on in human consciousness. When human beings look at this world, they're not seeing the world as it actually is. Very prominent, coming up between their perception and the object, are their desires. And so our vision of the world is so much colored by concepts of I and me and mine and attachment and hatred. This is all coming from desire. Yes, so human beings are very, very much under the sway of their desires in relationship to this world. And so therefore it is very much like a dream, even when we're awake. And this is what Prabhupada used to say. He said we're having at night a night dream, and in the day we're having a daydream. So this is very important for understanding the problems of human psychology. That our minds are very, very imaginative. Actually, here I have a quote from Srila Prabhupada where he's saying that we're creating out of our imagination in this material world so-called friends, so-called enemies. This is all imagination. Going on in our own mind. So now we want to understand how the living entity is becoming conditioned.
Chceme pochopit, jak se živá bytost stává podmíněnou.
How he's coming into these modes of nature.
Jak se dostává do těchto kvalit přírody.
And for this we have to now look at the process of creation.
Za tímhle účelem se musíme podívat na proces stvoření.
So, in the beginning, there is the pure living entity,
Takže na začátku je čistá živá bytost,
who is in this Turiya or Vasudeva Sattva state, clear consciousness.
která je ve stavu čistého vědomí.
But this clear consciousness is not quite the same as Krishna consciousness.
A toto čisté vědomí není tak docela stejné jako vědomí Krišny.
What is lacking?
Tam chybí.
What is lacking is this transcendental rasa.
Chybí transcendentální rasa.
So this Turiya clear consciousness is a state of self-realization.
Toto čisté vědomí tu je stavem seberealizace.
Understanding oneself to be pure spirit.
Chápání, já jsem čistá duše.
So this is the beginning point.
To je začáteční bod.
And in this state one is under the shelter of Lord Vasudeva.
Tento stav má svou útočiště pána Vasudeva.
So who is Lord Vasudeva?
To je pán Vasudeva.
Vasudeva is an expansion of Krishna for his pastimes outside of Goloka Vrindavan.
Vasudev je expanze Krišny pro jeho zábavy mimo Goloku Vrindavan.
For instance, Dwarkadish, the Lord of Dwarka, Krishna as the Lord of Dwarka, is Vasudeva Krishna.
Příklad Dwarkadish, pán Krišna jako pán Dwaraki je Vasudev Krishna.
And Lord Ramchandra, Lord of Ayodhya, is similarly Vasudeva.
Pán Ramachandra, pán Ayodhya je také Vasudev.
Lord Narayan, the Lord of Vaikuntha, is an expansion of Vasudeva.
Pán Vaikuntha, pán Narayan je expanzí Vasudeva.
So I'm now mentioning to you different Divya Leelas. They're all transcendental Leelas, but they're outside of the intimate Braja Leela of the Lord in His own personal abode, Goloka Vrindavan.
Já uvádím různé diviály, které jsou transcendentální, ale jsou mimo důvěrné si do pána Krišny Goloku Vrindavan.
And now the last time we met, I told you that this creation is also a Leela of the Lord.
Minule jsem vám říkal, že toto stvoření je také líla pána.
In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is called the Vyavahar Leela, which is the Lord's Leela in relationship to Maya, to the illusory energy. So in this Leela too, Lord Vasudeva is appearing. So this is the initial stage, or what the Upanishads call the Brahman stage. There is Vasudeva, and there are the jivas who are under his influence. They are not yet touched by material nature. Now Lord Vasudeva, he expands into what is called the Chatur Vyuha, which is the four forms. Chatur means four, and Vyuha means it's something like design. In other words, it's like a square, and on each corner there is one form of the Lord.
Chatur jsou čtyři a Vyuha je něco jako takový plán, schéma, takže je to jako čtverec a v každém rohu je jedna z podob pána.
So Vasudeva is the first corner of the square.
Vasudeva je první rohu toho čtverce.
And then for the material manifestation, he expands into the second corner, who is known as Sankarshan. Now this Sankarshan is otherwise known as Mahavishnu.
Tento Sankarshan je také známý jako Mahavishnu.
So as you well know, Mahavishnu, he is lying down on the causal ocean.
Víte, Mahavishnu ulehal na příčinný oceán.
Causal ocean is called Karna. Karnabdi. Karnabdi means causal ocean.
Se nazývá Karnabdi, příčinný oceán.
And he is in a state of yoga nidra. Now in this nidra, seeming sleep, he is enjoying his own transcendental pastimes. But the jivas who are been transferred to his care, they are actually in the primeval tamal gun. See, so Lord is sleeping, jivas are sleeping, but there is a great difference between the nature of these sleeps. Lord's sleep is transcendental. The jiva's sleep is actually, they are in this susupti state, total unconsciousness. And it's in this unconscious state that the seeds of desire are there. Yeah? What we heard from the Rig Veda, the root of the mind. So this susupti state is the root of desire. And actually, this root state is actually a kind of embodiment. We find in the Upanishads and in the commentaries given by great acharyas like Madhvacharya, there's this term karana deha, which means causal body. So actually, when you're sleeping at night and you pass into this unconscious state, this dreamless state of sleep, then you are there in the causal body. That causal body is simple to understand. It's the root state of material existence from which the mind and the gross body come out. So, seeds of desire are there, implanted, embedded within the causal body. So, then from here, Sankarshan or Mahavishnu, he expands further into the third quarter of the Chaturvyuha. And this is, he is known as Pradumna or Garbhodakashayi Vishnu. So it is here, with this expansion, that the Mahatattva is manifest. So the Mahatattva is the primal mind, cosmic mind. I don't know how much you know about classical philosophy, like the philosophy of Plato. But Plato had this idea of some ideal state in which all the items, all the ingredients of this gross existence are there in a kind of ideal form.
existuje v jeho světě ideální podoby.
So this is the Mahatattva.
A to je Mahatattva.
Within the Mahatattva, you have mind, intelligence, false ego.
Mahatattva je mysl, inteligence, falešné ego.
You have all the senses.
Všechny smysly.
You have the sense objects also.
Jsou tam i smyslové objekty.
But they're in a subtle state.
Jsou v subtilním stavu.
And the creation, as it unfolds, is drawing from that Mahatattva. The Mahatattva provides the form for the gross creation.
A jakmile se projevuje stvoření, tak to dostává všechny podklady z Mahatattva.
So, this is of course, this is on the level of the Lord and His manifestation, which is called samasti. So samasti means all inclusive. And you and I, we are on this state called vyasti. Vyasti means individuality, our individual existence. So there's a duplication or a replication from samasti to vyasti. Whatever is happening in this great cosmic unfoldment is also taking place in our own body. And you have direct experience of this. You see, from out of the subconsciousness, this karana deha, this root state, desires are growing up, and they're taking shape, taking form in what? In the mind. The subtle body, which is called linga sharira. Yes. So this is this Hiranyagarbha or Garbhodakshaya Vishnu state of creation. At this state, then the idea of this world comes into being. And this is, this is the thinking and also feeling state of contemplation of sense objects. So here the desires are becoming stronger and stronger. And so what has to follow is the gross manifestation. So then Pradumna, he expands one more time as Aniruddha. And Aniruddha is the source of the super soul. And the super soul enters into the heart of every physical body created by Brahma. Now, as you know, Brahma appears on the lotus flower that grows up from where? From Garbhodakshaya Vishnu's navel. At a certain stage where these desires are becoming very strong, then Brahma appears to create the gross bodies by which these desires can be satisfied. And Lord Aniruddha, Paramatma, enters into the hearts of these bodies along with the jiva. And thus the jiva becomes awake, he becomes alive to material activities. So the susupti stage, mode of ignorance, the dream stage, mode of passion, and then finally this awake, active stage, mode of goodness. Now, we are experiencing this every 24 hours. And you see, actually these Vishnu forms, they are one. They are different and yet they are one.
podoby Višnua jsou různé, ale zároveň jsou jedna osoba.
So actually, and we have quotations here from Upanishads and Vedanta Sutra. Actually, at night when you enter this deep sleep stage,
máme tady citáty z Upanishads a z Vedanta Sutry, že v noci, kdy se dostanete do stavu hlubokého spánku,
you're actually in touch with Mahavishnu.
jste ve styku s Mahavishnu.
In other words, all the Vishnus are there because Paramatma is there in our heart.
Tady všichni Višnové, Paramatma je v srdci.
So we are actually passing to and fro these three stages of creation within 24 hours.
My procházíme tímto třemi stády stvoření v rámci 24 hodin.
But that's, you have to understand, this is on the vyasti level, the local level.
Musíte chápat, že je to na té úrovni vyasti, která je lokální.
Because what is on the samasti level, the vast macrocosmic level, is also in a limited way here, in this body.
Co je na té makrokosmické úrovni samasti, tak je určité malé úrovni tady v těle.
And this is, because of this, the yogis, they, by their meditation and austerity, they are able to manipulate these stages of consciousness.
Díky tomu yogi, díky své meditaci a askezi jsou schopni manipulovat stavy vědomí.
So they can actually realize how the stage of this gross physical body, that is here on the what's called the Bhumi Loka, the earthly region of the universe. Bhur-loka. And then when the yogis get into the linga sharira, the subtle mind, and develop that consciousness, then through the mind they can rise up to Bhuvar-loka, Svar-loka, and Mahar-loka, these higher regions of the universe. Because these regions are within the cosmic subtle realm. So there's a connection between our subtle body and that universal subtle realm. And then the yogis who develop this karana deha, this causal body, purify it and use it to move around in the universe, they can achieve tapaloka and satyaloka. Yes, so in other words, within our consciousness, within our own mind, there are these different levels of the universe, equivalent. And there are the lower levels also, which are predominated by the demons. All of that is within this mind that we have. So the psychology of a human being, his inner struggles, this fight that he has between doing good and doing bad, all the different influences that are coming out. This is a replication of, on the cosmic level, the fight between demigods and demons and all the different levels of consciousness that are there on different planets.
jestli dělat dobro nebo zlo. To všechno je replika boje mezi polobohy a démony, který probíhá těch různých úrovních ve vesmíru.
So, these different states of consciousness are associated with these different expansions of the Lord. And we have come along in these expansions. But not to associate with the Lord in His Leela, but as we were explaining the other day, our interest is to enjoy His energy. So this is the manifestation of the three modes of nature and the states of consciousness that are associated with them. And so here we are. You see, this is what we're experiencing right now. And we are conditioned by this. And we will continue to be conditioned by it until turn away from this attempt to enjoy the material nature and take up the service of the Lord. So, I'm going to stop here and leave time open now for questions. I want to see from your questions if you have understood this properly. Yes.
From which one of them is this material world being manifested?
No, this is the initial Chaturvyuha is expanded from Goloka Vrindavan, to Dwarka and finally to Vaikuntha.
Původní Chaturvyuha se expanduje z Goloky Vrindavanu do Dváraky a potom nakonec na Vaikuntu.
But this is later Chaturvyuha, in which the four expand into the Mahatattva, or expand into the material energy. As Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshaya Vishnu and Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. Yes, in the back.
Takovým spožděním, že vždycky jako spíš žiju v minulém nebo budoucím čase. Člověk většinou nedokáže vychutnat tu přítomnost, jako čím je to způsobený. Že vždycky vzpomíná na to, co bylo a zase se třeba těší, nebo co bude, ale neumí jako vychutnat třeba tu přítomnost. Vždycky si na to třeba vzpomene až později, že to bylo dobře.
His problem is that he cannot really enjoy or somehow live in the present. He either remembers his past or taking pleasure from the remembrances or looking forward to the future. So he's asking what is this cause that we cannot live in the present and either remember the past or...
As soon as you think of the present, it's already in the past. You see? As soon as, in the time it takes for an object out there to become registered in your mind, time has already passed, and the thing that's in your mind, it's just an image now, and the thing out there has already changed. Like they say, when you look at the sun, because it takes 8 minutes for the light of the sun to reach your eye, you're seeing only the sun as it was 8 minutes ago. And even objects up close, there is some slight time gap. So the fact is, we are although we as spirit soul, we are eternally in the present. Our perceptions of anything, or even our thoughts of anything, that's all in the past.
Takže když my duše jsme tady v přítomnosti, tak všechno naše vnímání i myšlenky jsou v minulosti.
And that's Maya.
To je Maya.
Means nothing is actually real that we're perceiving.
Znamená, že nic z toho, co vnímáme, je skutečnosti není skutečné.
It's not really there anymore.
A už to tam tak není.
And then as far as our hopes for the future, that also doesn't exist.
Že našich nadějí do budoucna neexistuje.
These are just our desires, the way we would like things to be.
Jsou jenom naše touhy, jak bychom chtěli, aby se věci děly.
So you can see what Maya is.
Můžete vidět, co je Maya.
One is trying to enjoy a present which is already past
Člověk snaží užívat přítomnosti, která už se stala minulostí.
and thus doesn't exist anymore.
To už neexistuje.
And one is thinking about a future which also doesn't exist.
Myslí na budoucnost, která taky neexistuje.
And when it does exist, it will be past.
A když bude existovat, tak to bude minulost.
As soon as the future comes into our realm of perception and we start to engage with it, it's already the past. It's already gone.
Budoucnost přijde do naší oblasti vnímání, tak už se stane minulostí, už bude pryč.
So that's just the way things are in the material world.
Takže takhle to je v hmotném světě.
Yes?
Je možné vysvětlit rozdíl mezi pradhanou a mahatattvou, která je jasný about pradhana and mahatatva that sometimes in Bhagavatam it seems they're both the same, but sometimes there is some difference.
Well, actually there's a purport where Srila Prabhupada talks about this, and more or less he's saying that there's no use to try to really get into and distinguish these things.
Jednou výkladu Šrila Prabhupada o tom mluví a říká ve skutečnosti, že nemá cenu se snažit do toho proniknout a rozlišit tyhle dvě věci.
But just for convenience sake, we can take pradhan. Pradhan means source of ingredients. And Mahatattva is the manifestation of ingredients. So pradhan is mula prakriti, the root prakriti. So it's not manifest yet. It's like raw material. Like a bag of flour. You have a bag of flour, then you have the potential for puris and chapatis and samosas and so many things. But it's not manifest. You see. So Mahatattva, it's manifest. Here we actually have a diagram of the Mahatattva. Well, it was here, now it's disappeared. It became pradhan suddenly. I just had it, but... Oh, here it is. Pradhan became Mahatattva. So here you have... So at the top is Paramatma, and emanating from him is Kala, the time factor. And the living entity, the Jiva, he is caught in this time factor. Interacting with time, then brings out his previous impressions, svabhava. And karma, that's the force of his previous activities. And so then from there, then you get Mahatattva. And within Mahatattva, Ahankara manifests in three modes.
Mantra, kde se projevuje ahangára ve všech kvalitách.
So there's Jnana Shakti, or Vaikarika Ahankara it's called, which is in the Sattva Guna. And from this you get the mind and the demigods that control the senses. Then the Kriya Shakti, or the Adhyatma Shakti. You get Taijasa Ahankara, that's false ego in the mode of passion. And here are the senses, which are controlled by the demigods who are in the mode of goodness. And buddhi and prana. This is all in the Rajoguna. And then finally Dravya Shakti, or the Adibhuta. This is Tamasa Ahankara, false ego in mode of ignorance. And here you get these sense impressions, like sound and touch and form. And the elements, ether, air, fire, water, earth. So all of that is in the Mahatattva. And it is reproduced here, locally in this physical and mental self. Anything else? Yes?
Where in this concept is that or the one who says I am or who thinks I am?
That is the living entity, the spirit soul. That is the basis of the sense of identity. The living entity is caught up within this creation, which we've just described. Then his sense of identity is transferred to the modes of material nature. And so then, depending on what mode is prominent, he'll identify either with the mind, if he's in the mode of goodness, or with the senses in the mode of passion, or with the sense objects in the mode of ignorance. He thinks these things are himself. But that's illusion. Any other questions? Yes? Oh, okay.
Naše touha si užívat způsobuje naše podmínění, co nám pomůže udržet naše touhy směrem ke Krišnovi. Takže když jsme slabí a...
Naše touha si užívat způsobuje naše podmínění, co nám pomůže udržet si touhu, nebo nasměrovat touhu ke Krišnovi. Our desires to enjoy cause our conditioning. So how can we keep our desires directed to Krishna? What shall help us to be able to do that?
I'm going to talk about that tomorrow, when we get to the psychology of Bhakti Yoga. Okay. Yes?
Je původní místo naší připoutanosti v srdci, nebo jsou to výbory mysli. Is the original place of our attachment in the heart, or is it a product of the mind?
Well, you see, we've been speaking in these seminars how the mind is simply the result of a transformation of consciousness, pure consciousness. Today we heard, what we can understand from what we heard today, is that it is a transformation of taste, basically. When our mind has the taste for Krishna, for associating with Krishna, then that mind is pure. That's the pure consciousness of the soul, or the spiritual mind. And when the mind wants to associate with the modes of nature, then that is the material mind and the material identity coming out. The fifth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam gives a nice analogy. And that is of a ghee lamp, ghee wick in a lamp. So if the lamp is burning very nicely, then what do you get from it? You get light and you get heat. It destroys darkness. It's very nice. But if the same lamp doesn't burn nicely, then the flame is, weak and sputtering, and is also smoky, and it even makes the lamp, the brass of the lamp, all black. So in other words, this same lamp, the same ghee wick, fire, flame, is producing darkness instead of light. So you see, this is showing that it's the same principle, consciousness. But material consciousness enwraps us in darkness. And that consciousness is called the material mind. So when that is purified, then it's the spiritual mind. And that is giving us illumination. With that mind we can understand what is Krishna. Yes, and in this verse it says, it speaks of the two states of mind. One is tattva, which means the true state. Prabhupada translates that in this verse as the original position of the mind. And the materialistic state of the mind is called vritti. And Prabhupada translates that as various engagements. Means here that the mind is not engaged in Krishna consciousness, but it's engaged in 11 vrittis. So 5 of the 11 are in the sense objects. You see, when it is absorbed in hearing something or seeing something, that means it's looking after the objects of the senses. And so there are 5 such objects. And then another group of 5 is when the mind is absorbed in the senses themselves. Like in the act of using the hand to pick something up, or using the legs to walk, or when we're talking. So these are engagements of the mind in the active senses, karmendriya. And then the 11th is when the mind is engaged in itself.
Potom 11. zaměstnání, když se mysl zabývá sama sobě.
In mental concoctions
Mentálními výmysly.
and feelings of self-importance.
A pocity vlastní důležitosti.
You see, absorption in self-importance, whether one may be feeling happily self-important or miserably self-important, but it just means one is absorbed in himself. False ego.
Do sebe sama.